And I was okay. So you'd have this argument about communism and socialism and stuff, and don't forget there's something like a social democracy, which most of Europe practices, and that is when they fear socialism. No. I mean there are forms of government where the state is strong and there's a strong safety net for everybody, and they tax really really heavily, but the people still have a major say in what's going on with their government. And when these people are taxed heavily, it's not like they're just taking away and not giving anything back. They have daycare centers in their factories. They have a shorter work week. They get more paid vacation. Blah 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 on down the line. But because of the American mentality, that frontier, that spirit of individuality, just the thought of paying any kind of tax just makes a good number of Americans even fail to see that the roads and the schools and the post office and all these things that government provides, they forget all about that. Clean drinking water coming out of your tap. They just think, no, I can do that all on my own. I can go build roads. I don't need the government to do that. And I can get clean drinking water. I don't need the government to provide that for me, et cetera. I don't need a police force. I can arm myself and take care of myself. I don't need a fire department, because if my house catches fire, I'll put it out because I'm a strong individual. And the idea of the culture that's there, that exists before they experiment with another government. I was watching this program on Japan called Empires, and Japan way back, even before they lost in World War II, and even before they started adopting Western ways and wearing pants and the Portuguese went there and started trading with them, and there was even Christian missionaries that came from Portugal. They were Catholic Jesuit missionaries that were converting a lot of Japanese, surprisingly. But they had a very rigid society. And then after all the Christians and all the Portuguese were purged, they still did some trading with the Dutch, but their shogun, their head guy, purged all the Christians and then really clamped down with a lot of rules in a very strict society. And in that case, the peasant was taxed very heavily and got nothing in return. Okay, that's kind of like fascism, where some segment of society is really. And that's a good example of why Nazi Germany was fascist, because they picked this group. They picked the Jews. They picked the infirmed, the mentally. I don't forget what the term is. There's the new politically correct term, but the mentally disabled, perhaps that might be the new term. The gays, all these people. They put them away and took their goods away. They took everything. Not only did they tax them, they just took their land, all their property, all their jewelry, everything that was worth anything away from them and put them in camps. And that really helped finance a lot of the war, surprisingly. By just seizing all this stuff, it added up to something. Where am I going with this? Okay, so you had Japan, and you also had this long European culture that's different than Japan. The Japan is very rigid. And then you look at Russia, where they had the czars and you had the peasants at the bottom, and there was these rich, powerful people, kind of similar to this sort of feudal society in Japan. A lot of these run sort of parallel. Japan had a feudal society long after Europeans had their feudal society, where your King Arthur, your knights, and there's a kingdom over here and a castle over here. There's a castle over here, and and they fight it out. And they're always there's no united country. There's no sense of nation. That emerged in Europe before it did in Japan. But near the end, after everybody was purged, all the Christians were purged, and they basically closed themselves off from the rest of the world. They started thinking of themselves. This prior shogun united Japan, pretty much created peace. They were all fighting amongst themselves. And then the third shogun is the one that imposed this really, really heavy, strict government. It's almost very much like a George Orwell Big Brother type sort of thing, where everybody was being watched and you could be punished for the littlest thing. Somebody could just point a finger at you, say they violated this rule. You were told how to dress. Certain classes could not wear certain types of clothing. Anyway, okay, long way around this. But I got to thinking, I said, when communism was an experiment, and possibly the main reason, or one of the strong reasons why it failed in Russia, because you were trying it in a culture that had hundreds and hundreds of years of history of this very brutal, country to live in as far as weather, and hard scrabble life, and then used to this ruling class and a system of peasants and farmers and all that. And then when you impose this communism thing, it didn't work out because of the nature of the culture. Even in Japan today, you still have this very rigid society where everybody is expected to know their place. There's an expression in Japan, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, which is almost the opposite of what we have in the Anglo-American world. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's the opposite, isn't it? So it made me think. It made me wonder. And take, for example, George Bush's plan of the neocon plan of invading Iraq, and then we're going to plant the seeds of democracy, and then democracy is going to sprout all over the Middle East. But he knows nothing of the culture. Perhaps the culture is not a place that would be conducive to democracy. The reason why it was successful in America, and then later, our form of democracy was successful because we owed a lot to England that already had a parliament where different classes had a say in government. And we took it one step further where we didn't even have a monarchy. But already Europe, even though they might have had a monarchy, the king was not as strong as he was before when they started having a parliament and prime minister. And so that sort of thing was successful in places like Canada and Australia because of the culture that it was descended from. And then you take the countries like Spain and Portugal. Did I say Portugal before? I don't know. Take countries that were colonized by the Spanish and the Portuguese that had a heavy Catholic influence. And you still, for the longest time, had a lot of unrest. Still to this day in South America, there's still all these little wars popping up and battles, and democracy just doesn't seem to work that great in those other places. And I think it's because of the culture that it was sprung from and it was colonized by, and so maybe each culture, different part of the world, whether you're Eskimo or you're Chinese or you're Samoan, you just can't change forms of government like changing your clothes.